Welcome. In this video we're going to talk about recursion, which is a way of writing programs that repeat themselves, different to using for and while loops. So we're going to see a brief introduction to recursion, then we're going to see step by step how to design a recursive function, and we're going to see the types of recursion that we have available. And finally we're going to see a longer example with recursion and how it alters the stack of calls in the program. And in a future video, we'll see a couple examples in how to work with recursion with lists and how to compare it to iteration. So, what's recursion? We can see it through this webcomic in which a person takes a small number from a sheet on a poll and then finds out that the sheet itself was contained within the number. So, what's actually recursion is defining something in terms of itself. So whenever you see any problem defined, for example, such as the factorial, defined as, okay, the factorial of 10 is 10 times the factorial of 9, or the factorial of 3 is 3 times the factorial of 2. We are doing recursion. This is very common in mathematics, and you will have seen many functions like this, especially functions defined with multiple by parts, for example. And we can see that we can start computing the recursion here easily. For example, if we compute the factorial of 3, we see that it's 3 times the factorial of 2, which is 2 times the factorial of 1, which is 1 times the factorial of 0, which is 0 times the factorial of minus 1. And we need to stop here, right? Or we need to stop somewhere along the way. Otherwise, we're just going to find that every factorial is equal to 0, because every number will go down to 0, and anything times 0 will be 0. So every recursive function needs a recursive definition, so a reference to itself. In this case, the factorial is referencing itself right here when it says x times x, n times n minus 1 factorial, and a stopping criterion. So a base case that says, okay, whenever this condition holds, then we stop and the answer is this number. And that number should not depend on the function itself. So, for example, if we have our full recursive equation for the factorial, we can see that the general case would be that the factorial of any number is that number times the factorial of the previous number, so n minus 1 factorial. But only when n is greater than 0. If n is equal to 0, then the factorial is 1. So in this case up here, instead of computing the factorial of 0 as 0 times minus 1 factorial, we would say that the factorial of 0 is 1, and then we would solve the whole problem by saying the factorial of 0 is 1, and then 1 times 1 is 1, and then 1 times 2 is 2, and then 3 times 2 is 6. And that would be the answer to our problem. There are two different situations that you need to take into account, which correspond to the previous cases we talked about. You have the base case, in which the problem is so simple you can just solve it. For example, you can say the factorial of 0 and the factorial of 1 are very easy to compute, and we can say they're both equal to 1. And then you have a general case in which you say, I don't know the answer, but I know how to get closer to that answer. So, for example, in the factorial, that would be saying the factorial of any given number is the factorial of the previous number times the original number. So, whenever you propose a recursive algorithm for a function or a problem that you have, you need to verify two properties. One, the termination, and two, the correctness. Termination means that it will stop eventually. So, for example, the factorial is defined for numbers positive, greater than 0, and then it subtracts 1 every time. So it eventually will reach 0, even though it can take a very long time and produce a very large number, it always terminates. But if you mess up the implementation or the definition of the base and the general case, you can have, for example, a factorial that goes negative and then never stops, because the number will never be 0 if we start at minus 1 and then go to minus 2, minus 3, minus 4, and so on. And then we have correctness. Correctness means that for any problem we have, in any question we could throw at any value we could throw at the function, the algorithm will always terminate and be correct. So in this case would be, okay, the general case is correct if the definition holds that for every number, the factorial of that number is that number times the previous factorial, and if the base case matches. We usually have to prove the correctness of functions, mostly by mathematical proof of induction, but you generally don't have to worry about this if you follow the general recommendations. So, how would we implement the factorial into Python? First, we would define a function called factorial and give it the appropriate number of arguments. In this case, just one, because we only need to know the current factorial we're computing. And then somewhere in that function, you need to have a recursive call. So, for example, down here we have the recursive call to factorial to n of the minus 1, to the n minus 1. And then we multiply that value by n and return it. This would be the general case, and it would match this part of the equation that we had up here, almost exactly. And then we would have n equals 0, which would be the base case, the condition of the base case, and in this case we would just return 1. So this is the transliteration to Python from the mathematical equation that we had in the previous slide. In general, whenever you want to design a recursive function, you first need to understand the problem statement and see how it translates to a recursive function in mathematics. Or see how it would translate to a base case and a general case that would cover all bases. The case analysis would mean that you need to define properly both cases and then find out if those two or maybe additional conditions in the general or the base case are needed to cover any possible input to the function. Then you need to translate this description of the algorithm from a base case and general case in your own head or in mathematics or in a sheet of paper to actual Python code and write a Python function. Then you need to validate the algorithm that has been implemented. First, you always need to go to get closer to the solution in every step. So every recursive call needs to get you closer to the base case. Otherwise, you'll have an infinite recursion and your program will fail. Then you need to check that the input data for the new call meets the established input conditions. So if the input to the factorial method needs to be positive, you need to check that every time that you lower the number by 1, it's actually going to be positive or equal to 0. Otherwise, you can also find an infinite recursion problem. We can classify recursion problems in many different ways, but one of them is by checking how they recurse and how they call the recursive function. So we could have linear recursion in which we only have one recursive call per example. So an example of this is the factorial function that we already showed, in which we only call the factorial 1. But because after calling the factorial we need to compute an additional element, so first we need to compute the factorial and then we need to apply the multiplication here, this is called non-tail recursion, because the recursion is not the last thing that happens on the Python method. However, if we were to compute the remainder of two numbers, so for example the remainder of 9 divided by 3, we would compute it as such. If the number is already lower than the divisor, then we would know that it's that number. For example, 4 divided by 7, the remainder would be 4. But if it's larger, we need to remove the b from a and call remainder again. So in this case, the recursive call would be the last thing that we do on the method, and then we call that tail recursion, which has a few advantages in optimization, but not specifically in Python. And of course, we have multiple recursion, which is when you have multiple calls to the recursive function each time. This generates a more complicated execution trace, but for example, we can think of the Fibonacci numbers, which are computed as the sum of the previous two Fibonacci numbers. So for example, the first two are 0 and 1, then the third would be 0 plus 1 equals 1, then 1 plus 1 equals 2, and so on and so forth. In this case, it can never be tail recursive because we always need to combine the results of both function calls. If we want to make an algorithm that is not tail recursive to be tail recursive, we can always add an additional parameter to store the result. So for example, this is the same implementation of the factorial. In this case, instead of returning 1 times the factorial of the next number, we just return the accumulated result. And whenever we have the result here, in the general case, we multiply it by the current number. So instead of computing the factorial of each number and then multiplying it backwards, we multiply it forwards. So we would multiply 3 times the current result, which would initially be 1, and then 2 times the current result, and then 1 times the current result, and then we'd reach 0 and return that value at the end. In this case, we, for example, have created an additional function because the user does not know how to use this function. Because when we want to compute a factorial, we only need to pass one number. What would be the value of result? The user doesn't know. And the user needs an external function to say, okay, call the factorial here, and we will take care of this second argument and the second parameter such that it has the correct value to accumulate the result in that parameter. And then we'll get you the result back to you. So this would be the user-facing function, and this would be the recursive function used to compute the result the user wants. A very important concept in recursion is the call stack. So every call to a function has to store a few values in memory. So for example, if you have any parameters, you have to store those parameters. If you have any local variables, you need to store them somewhere. And you need to know which function called you, so when you return a value, you can return it back to them. These values are all stored in a position in memory called an activation register. An activation register is just a region of memory in a place called the call stack. So if you remember from the data structures section, the stacks, you will see that the calls form a stack by stacking upon each other. So if you have a main function and then you call another function, that gets located on top of the stack. And then if that function calls another, it gets accumulated on there. So every time a function ends, the activation register is deleted, and then the previous function takes control again. We only are interested in the top of the stack because that is the only function that is going to be executed. And every time we use recursion, we accumulate many values on the call stack. If we need, for example, 10 calls to solve the factorial of 10 with a recursive implementation, then we'll need 10 activation registers on the call stack to solve that problem. But the call stack is limited. There's a function you can call sys.getRecursionLimit that shows you how many frames, how many activation registers you can have on the call stack. If you go over this limit, then a runtime error occurs, and then program will crash. Let's see an example of the call stack with the factorial. This is the classic definition of the factorial with the base case. When it's equal to 0, the result is 1, and when it's not equal to 0, the result is n times the recursive call. And then we finally return the resulting value. And if we were to call, for example, the factorial of 3, we will start with a call stack with the main function in it, with the main execution of the module. And then we would call the factorial of 3, and then a new activation register would appear on the call stack. We can see the values that are going to be stored, and even variables that have not been initialized yet have a location such that whenever they have a value in them, they can store it. So in this case, the parameter is 3, and what would happen, we would go to n equals 0 because n is equal to 3, this condition is false, and we would jump to the else side of the if. And then we would execute this expression and evaluate factorial. And this would create a new call to factorial, this time with n-1, which would mean that n is 2. But see that the other call to factorial still exists on the call stack, but is now inactive. The active one is n equals 2, and the same thing would happen. 2 is equal to 0 is false, would jump back down here, and see that to compute the multiplication, we need to compute the factorial again, this time of 2 minus 1, which is 1. We now have 3 activation registers for the same function, each with a different parameter, And now we would jump again to the same condition, 1 equals 0 is false, else to compute the multiplication, we need to compute the factorial of 1 minus 1, which is 0, and then would jump back up here to the top of the pyramid. You can see that in this case, we've already written that result is equal to 1. Why? Because 0 is equal to 0, then the result is equal to 1, and then the result will be returned. So whenever we assign the value, we can see the value change here, and whenever we return the value, this activation register gets deleted, and now we jump back to the previous one. And now we have that the result is 1, because this resulted in 1, multiplied by 1 results in 1. We then return this value from the result variable and destroy that activation register. And we'd now be here with the result equal to 2, because we'd have that the function returned 1 times 2 would be 2, and then we'd do the same thing, returning, deleting the activation register, and going back to the initial call to the factorial. And in this case, finally, we'd get that 3 times 2 would be 6, and then f would get the final value from the previous return, which would be 6. If you use recursion, you're going to use much more elements in the call stack than if you use an iterative algorithm. So most algorithms can be implemented in a recursive or in an iterative way, and in both cases you will compute the same value. But if you use the recursive version, you will use n+1 activation registers in linear recursive algorithms. And then you would need to account for that memory consumption. If you go over this memory consumption limit, then you have a problem, because you will see the stack overflow error, as we mentioned before. Some languages, but not Python, can optimize the call stack whenever we design a tail recursive function, but that's not the case for Python. So you'll get a stack overflow error in either way. And finally, you need to trust that the system works. It's a very different way of thinking, and you can get confused by how it actually works and how it manages to build the result up. But you need to trust the elements of the system. If you formulate your problems correctly, and if you find the correct base and general cases and the correct conditions, the result will follow. And you can always use the debugger to see the activation, the call stack and the activation registers in action. And I'll see you on the next video.